Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about different statements and political updates. According to information we have, Berlin and Oslo promised new injections into the Kiev region. German finance minister stated in Kiev that Germany is committing to allocate 9 billion euros annually for the next 2 years. The day before, by the way, Chancellor Merz admitted that Germany does not have the resources for previous social payments to its citizens. It seems that Germany is going to go for all in. The Prime Minister of Norway also promised more than 8 billion in aid to Ukraine in 2025 and 2026. This is a very important piece of news because almost at the same time the President of Ukraine Zelensky stated that Russia is not ready for the end of the war, which means that Zelensky got additional money. Zelensky has contracts with the United States of America to purchase weapons for money that were allocated by the European Union, so that is why he is ready to continue the war. But of course he can't say like this. Obviously he will blame Russia for this. Zelensky complains that no statements from Moscow about willingness to not advance further can be considered concessions. According to him, Russia continues to look for new excuses not to stop the war, ignoring initiatives from the US and Ukraine to ceasefire. Zelensky added that Kiev has repeatedly supported proposals for a ceasefire and negotiations without any conditions, including the option of a trilateral meeting with the US and Russia. However, Russia has refused every time, inventing new reasons. He said he has already complained to Trump, emphasizing the need to strong steps from Washington if the Kremlin continues to avoid negotiations. And of course, it's very important to understand the reaction of the United States of America. And by the way, the President of the United States of America during the previous 12 hours made lots of very interesting statements. And the most important is that US no longer spends money on Ukraine. Donald Trump said, of course, US does not spend money because Germany and Norway spends money for them. Key points from the statements of the US President Vladimir Putin's visit to Alaska indicates that the Russian president is seeking to a resolution in Ukraine. Details of the security guarantees for Ukraine have not been discussed. However, significant security guarantees for Ukraine should be provided by Europe. The US only needs to support this by sending weapons for European money. Donald Trump said that he discussed the topic of nuclear arsenal reduction with Putin at their meeting in Anchorage. Trump stated his desire for further nuclear arm reduction together with Russia and the wish to involve China in this process. But obviously Russia will never accept this proposal because Russia don't trust anymore neither the United States of America or the European Union. Now let's put some back to Ukraine and let's discuss the most important updates along the line of combat contact. And first let's talk about the Kherson direction. During the previous 12 hours, very interesting video was published from the M14 road. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources and they were surprised when they faced this situation. In this video we can see first of all an attempt from the Ukrainian side to build protection nets along the most important supply line M14 between the city of Nikolaev and the city of Kherson. But something tells me that for some reason the Ukrainians decided not to finish the production of the building because they just added protection nets to the left and to the right of the road, but there is no protection nets on the top. Anyway, the most important part of this video, and according to the author of this video, is that the Russians have already established complete control over the supply line. And as you can see during this video, at least 2 vehicles were damaged and destroyed by the Russian FPV drones. This is a very important video because the question is whether it's just a single action from the Russian side, or during the next days and weeks we're going to see more and more videos of this type when Russians are going to establish complete control over M14 road with the purpose to destroy everything that goes in the direction of the city of Kherson. Why I'm asking this? Because during the previous 24 hours another important statement was made by the governor of Kherson direction from the Russian side. He said that forcing a crossing of the Dnipro to liberate the right bank of Kherson is possible. All that's needed is an order, said said Kherson region governor Saldo in interview. So the Russians just yesterday stated that they need just an order to cross the river and to begin the battle for the city of Kherson. And right after that, 12 hours later, we got the video how the Russians established complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines. So lots of very interesting details and questions, and I would like to remind you once again that according to agreements between the United States of America and the Russian Federation, the front line in the Kherson direction and in the Zaporozhye direction will be freezed if, let's say, peaceful settlement comes, which means that by the time when Russians and Ukrainians will sign any agreement where the front line goes, this is exactly going to be the border between the Russian Federation and Ukraine in the future. So that is why the Russians have all chances to begin offensive operation both in the Kherson and the Zaporozhye direction and to take as many as possible territories before final signature. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporozhye direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. First, let's talk about the eastern Zaporozhye area. During the previous 24 hours and during the previous night, very interesting video was published by pro-Ukrainian resources of 225th Assault Regiment. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were counterattacking Russian positions in the area of the village by the name of Vorona. So this is very important video because the village of Vorona fell in Russian hands several weeks ago, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, but since that moment we haven't received anything that could confirm this information. And just today the pro-Ukrainian resources of 225th Assault Regiment published this video which confirms Russian control over the settlement. In this video we can see how Ukrainians entered the village of Vorona from the east, from the west, and how Ukrainians were attacking Russian positions on the territory of the settlement. Based on this video we haven't adjusted anything, we just used this video to confirm that the Russians indeed on the territory of Vorona and that the Russians managed to dig in deeper. So which means that the Russians most likely are going to begin moving further in the western direction. It seems that the Russians are planning to intensify their offensive operation further in the western direction with the purpose to take as many as possible different villages in this area and to shorten the distance to the main supply logistic road R85 between the settlements of Pokrovsk and Gulyai-Polye. As soon as the Russians are able to establish physical or FPV drone control over this territory, we're gonna start seeing the complete collapse of the entire direction of the entire Ukrainian defense in this eastern Zaporozhye direction, which can lead obviously to completely unpredictable consequences. Now let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special. It's not just about the previous 24 hours. The most important thing is that during the previous 3 days, we haven't received almost anything important about this direction. No changes on the ground, no claims, no additional progress, no interesting videos, which is very interesting. And obviously, we start thinking that either there are very heavy clashes between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and both are trying to get the initiative in their hands, and the situation is right now is 50-50, or both the Russians and the Ukrainians suffered huge losses during the Russian breakthrough, and now both the Russians and the Ukrainians are regrouping before continuing their offensive operations or counterattacks. At the same time, several pro-Russian resources reported that there was a small progress from the Russian sides to the east of the city of Mirnograd. These territories were taken by the Russians, including all dense network of fortifications that are located in this area. So these territories were taken by the Russians according to several more or less reliable pro-Russian resources. As for the city of Konstantinovka, nothing special happened during the previous 24 hours. The only thing that worth attention is Russian FPV drone attacks and Russian activities in the area of the settlement of Stepanovka. During the previous weeks, the Russians were fighting for the settlements of Rusin Yar and for the settlements of Yablunovka. And when the Russians finished the battle for these territories, now the Russians finished the regrouping, and most likely in coming days they will try to attack the settlement of Stepanovka at least from 3 directions: from the south, from the west, and most likely from the southeast. So the next target is this settlement. If Russians are able to take under complete control this territory, this can lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense already in the western direction. Furthermore, when talking about the western part of the city of Konstantinovka, lots of explosions and lots of attacks were recorded exactly in this area. So the Russians during the previous 12 hours, during the previous night, attacked several buildings, multi-storage buildings, that Ukrainians use for their contingent at the temporary deployment points. A lot of explosions, a lot of destructions were recorded, and this is, as you can see, exactly located in the western part. Most likely Ukrainians were keeping their reinforcements and reserves exactly in this area with the purpose, if something happens, to send these units and send these forces exactly in the direction of Stepanovka and the settlement by the name of Dovga-Balka. So, which means that most likely when the Russians destroyed Ukrainian temporary deployment points for their reserves, we believe that they will begin offensive operation in the direction of Stepanovka, and they will take a look how these things are going to develop. Very high chances that the Russians will secure this territory, and this can get the situation, this area of Konstantinovka, a bit closer to the total collapse. Now let's talk about the Liman-Sivers direction. Today we receive lots of updates, mainly from pro-Ukrainian side, about the magical wood, magical forest. So the forest, Serebryanka forest, this part that located between the settlements of Kremenaya, Bilogorovka, Siversk, and the settlements of Zarechno-Tarskoy, we're talking about this area, has the title of Serebryanka forest by the name of the settlement of this, but the soldiers on the ground are calling this area as this area as magical forest. I don't know why I call this area magical forest, but probably due to the situation and due to the very heavy clashes for this territory that started in the late November of 2022, when Ukrainians, after the Kharkiv counter-offensive operation, managed to restore almost complete control over this territory. So obviously the battle for the magical forest currently is the longest battle since the beginning of the entire special military operation. And now we see that the Russians either are about to finish the battle for this territory or have already won this battle. The Ukrainian sources reported that the defense of the Serebryanka forestry, or the magical forest, unfortunately is coming to an end. This is the statement of pro-Ukrainian resource. Along with this, who has connections with the ground, or probably who is on the ground. Along with this, the defense of the bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Zherebets River is also coming to an end. This significantly worsens the positions for both case settlements east of the Kramatorsk-Slaviansk agglomeration. We are talking about Siversk and Liman. Siversk is already partially half surrounded, encircled from two sides, and if the enemy, the Russians, breaks out from the Serebryansky forest to Dronivka and captures it, then it will be surrounded from three sides. Things that are, to put in mind, not very good, if not say completely bad. So the Ukrainians are saying that during the next weeks, after the Russians finish the securing of the magical forest, the Russians will continue offensive operation in the area between the settlements of Yampol, in the area towards the village by the name of Dronovka, with the purpose to cross the river of Seversky Donets and to land infantry on the Ukrainian side. So, summarizing everything, the Russians will try to create something like this. If Russians are able to take under complete control these territories, we can start talking about complete collapse of the Siversk defense, because from this very moment we expect that the Russians will intensify their offensive operation from the south in the direction of these villages and the towns, and the Russians will intensify their offensive operation from the north, and the Russians will have just one purpose: to cut the Siversky cauldron and to force the Ukrainians to fall back through the only corridor that will last for the armored forces of Ukraine under very heavy fire and Russian control with FPV drones and artillery systems. So it seems that these territories soon will give us a lot of very interesting details, and obviously at the same time we should expect another offensive operation from the Russian side in the direction of the city of Liman. The Ukrainians understand what the Russians are trying to do, of course, and during the previous days they carry out another suicide counter-offensive operation with the purpose to take under control the village of Novomikhailovka. Ukrainians sent infantry, 20 stormtroopers, and they published this video. But the vehicle was destroyed, and later every single soldier of the armored forces of Ukraine who was involved in the battle for Novomikhailovka was also destroyed. So counterattack failed, and now the Russians are free-handed to move further in the direction of Siversk, the cities of Liman and Siversk, and the river of Seversky Donets. As for the Kupiansk, Kharkiv directions and the Sumy regions, during the previous 24 hours or during the previous night, nothing special happened. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.